Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, July 8th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Freedlander, journalist and author of the AOC Generation, How Millennials Are Seizing Power and Rewriting the Rules of American Politics, joins us to look at the state of the left within the context of AOC, her run, and Eric Adams' victory in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary. Meanwhile, rescue efforts in the Surfside, Florida condo collapse have ended, transitioning to a recovery operation, devastating for the families of the deceased and missing, 54 officially declared dead, and 86 people unaccounted for. All fans have been barred from attending the Tokyo Olympics amid a COVID surge and subsequent protests. 4 people suspected of assassinating Haiti's President Moise have been killed, and 2 arrested after a firefight with police. No word yet on who the suspects are. Meanwhile, disturbing details emerge out of a facility for thousands of migrant children in Fort Bliss, Texas, including lack of clean clothing and bedding, lack of medical care, and the use of a bullhorn or blasting music to wake up kids in the morning. Yes, this is under President Biden, folks. Dozens of House Democrats have signed on to an expansion of Medicare's coverage, including dental, vision, and hearing, which they want included in the reconciliation package. The US is giving the UK assurance that they will not house Julian Assange in a supermax prison if extradited, trying to entice the UK into handing Assange over. Not good news. And lastly, former South African President Jacob Zuma was taken into custody to begin serving his 15-month prison sentence yesterday, found guilty of contempt in a corruption investigation. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. I am here for Sam Seder. He is out today, but we have got a great show for you. You won't miss him too much, I promise you. Let's start with the typical Fox News ridiculousness. So, as the Delta variant spreads, the Biden campaign is announcing a new initiative to go door to door with a vaccination campaign. They're going to go to places of worship and essentially offer up vaccinations. I don't know how effective this is going to be, but something has to be done because only 20 states, I believe, thus far have reached the 70% vaccination threshold, and the Delta variant is 2 times more contagious than the original variant of COVID, and it's really starting to run rampant over many parts of the country. But Fox continues to have quite the freak out. Here is Charlie Kirk on Tucker Carlson's program last night. He's continuing to be Fox's resident young person even as he ages. I'm sure he pretends not to. He cosplays as a college student, or at least tries to appear like their buddy. So here he is pledging solidarity with his fellow college students who may be compelled to be vaccinated.
But more than anything else, Tucker, what we are going to do is a massive public relations campaign and make sure students know they are not alone. They don't have to hide in the shadows. All of a sudden, they're concerned that if they get the vaccine, they're going to be treated as if there's something. I said this earlier, and this is a big statement, but it's almost this apartheid-style open-air hostage situation. Like, oh, you can have your freedom back if you get the jab. This is unacceptable. We're going to fight back against it.
He almost said open air prison there. Open air hostage.
What was the if to apartheid? If you do this, you can have your freedom.
Yeah, if you become white, right? Like if you change your skin color, it might not be entirely analogous, Charlie. Perhaps time to finish your degree at your college, right? Here's another prong of the arguments, though, being leveled at Fox News. So we have the, oh, it's discrimination on one side, very within the vein of the Marjorie Taylor Greene accusation that this was similar to Jews' treatment in the Holocaust, which was understandably met with a ton of outrage, as should these apartheid comments, although luckily Charlie Kirk is not a member of the House of Representatives. But Brian Kilmeade is representing on Fox and Friends the other way that conservatives are trying to attack this issue.
Meanwhile, 7 minutes after the top of the hour, one of the big stories, been with us for the last 2 years, is COVID-19. The origin is the top story, but the focus of this administration on vaccination is mind-boggling. Listen, in many cases, they've done a very good job getting the word out and getting the vaccine out. From Johnson & Johnson to Pfizer to Moderna, they're available if you want them, but that's not enough. Now you need to be berated by none other than Dr. Fauci because you're playing politics. That's the reason you may have not gotten it.
Playing public health.
This is not complicated. We're not asking anybody to make any political statement one way or another. We're saying try and save your life and that of your family and that of the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard for someone like Brian Kilmeade to understand because for him and for other members of the right or people that watch Fox News, the majority of their politics is revolving around how can I own the libs in this way? How can I essentially buck social trends that I find offensive to my way of life because it wasn't exactly how I saw the world when I was 13 or whatever, when I was a kid. I mean, that's so much of what this is just reactionary politics and also attempting to flip off the left, right? And make sure that they express their acrimony for cultural shifts. But here is the reality of the Delta variant, because this isn't some game. This isn't, just a way to say I'm not gonna participate in what the government is telling me to do, what Joe Biden is telling me to do. There are real consequences, obviously, to not getting vaccinated, and we're seeing them in Missouri, which is one of the states that has the lowest vaccination rates, and the Delta variant is, I think, around 80% of what they're seeing in terms of cases there.
Savannah, what do Springfield hospitals need most right now?
Yeah, Joe and Gina, the surge in cases has created a large demand for ventilators. Now, here at the University of Kansas Hospital, they say that they haven't sent any ventilators yet, but they may have to soon. They say typically the process goes that Mercy Hospital in Springfield, they would be calling on the state of Missouri for relief first, because Mercy Hospital in Springfield ran out of ventilators as of this weekend, and they're working to get some supplies from their sister hospitals in Northwest Arkansas and in St. Louis. Mercy's also asking for any available travel nurses or physicians to relieve some of their exhausted staff members. They've heard it's the only way this surge will slow down is if more people get vaccinated.
We can't stop talking about it. We've got to keep influencing the community because it is the only thing. You look around, this is unique. The other places around the country don't have COVID. It's just not there.
Well, I mean, it's certainly not there to the extent that we're seeing in states like Missouri, states like Kansas, like Iowa, who are being hit hard right now. I mean, they are still in the beginning of the pandemic there. The fact that in the summer months when when COVID is not as likely to spread, we're seeing that kind of surge, a shortage of ventilators and beds, that should be chilling to anybody that lives there and anybody who has loved ones and anybody who wants to move past this. And it's purely because of efforts like we're seeing on Fox News to downplay the necessity for vaccines. And vaccine hesitancy is you can draw a direct line to the increase in hospitalizations and crises in states.
It also sets the table for a worse variant to possibly even emerge from this one. Like, the more we let this gallop around out of, I don't know, lackadaisicalness or whatever, the more it has a chance to mutate into a way that maybe it starts affecting children, and then maybe we might take it seriously.
I wouldn't even hold my breath on that. because their obsession with, cultural fealty or their resistance to this, it's being effectively weaponized by people like Tucker Carlson, who saw that this was a constituency that he could tap into. And it's unfortunately, like a lot of propaganda campaigns, Fox wages, and this goes deeper than Fox, but they've multiplied it. It's effective. So please, if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, please do. So there isn't an even worse variant than the Delta variant that we're seeing, as Matt said. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, David Freedlander will be joining us to talk about the progressive movement.
Thank you, Emma. Folks, today's show is sponsored by one of my favorite sponsors, Sunset Lake. They make great CBD products. You can find them at sunsetlakecbd.com. What do they have? They have gummy bears. They have tinctures, which have been a huge boon to my sleep. They have smokables. They have pre-rolls. They have smalls. They have fudge and coffee, all with CBD that is grown with a tremendous amount of integrity and is tested by third party, so you can find exactly what the contents of what you are ingesting are. They also have fantastic business practices. $15 minimum wage at the company. It is mostly employee owned. They use integrated pest management. That means no pesticides. They use 100% organic fertilizer. They work with the University of Vermont in terms of their agricultural practices, and they are real movement partners. They've been really helpful in calling attention to and financially supporting the nurses who have been on strike in Worcester at St. Vincent's Hospital for well over 100 days now. They've been helping in their community. Just a great bunch of folks who make a great product that has the salve. And why do I say that? Well, because I'm looking at my hand. It has arnica in it. And in the summer, longtime listeners will know, and maybe this is too much information, but sue me. I get eczema on my hands, and it is incredibly painful. It makes it difficult to go to sleep. The only thing that I've ever taken that has helped has been like prednisone, but I don't want to take that on any type of regular basis. And I have gotten a tremendous amount of relief from the arnica CBD salve that is ostensibly for your muscles, but I put it on at night and I can go to sleep. And I think it helps long-term too. But nevertheless, all sorts of products. They have skin lotion. Check it out. sunsetlakecbd.com. Go there and use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, one word. They're fans of the show. Left is best, one word, and you get 20% off. Check it out now. Back to Emma.
We are back. Thank you, Sam. We'd like to welcome to the program David Freedlander. Do we have David? Okay. We will hold off on welcoming him. Ah, there he is. I'd like to welcome to the program David Freedlander, journalist and author of the AOC Generation: How Millennials Are Seizing Power and Rewriting the Rules of American Politics. David, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Great. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, full disclosure, I should say that I am interviewed in your book. I didn't mention that David, I spoke with him a little bit for the Peacock show, which everyone should check out there if you haven't already, Majority Report listeners. We do an extra hour, Sam and I, interviewing some really interesting reporters. And we talked a little bit about the Eric Adams candidacy, which I want to get to in a bit. But first of all, I should say your book is really excellent. It's a great encapsulation of, the leftist surge that swelled from Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign, and it largely focuses on, as the title suggests, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as just a bit of a ballast for the progressive movement. Let's start with what motivated you to write this book, besides obviously interviewing me?
That was the first. That was the first reason. You and I got to get coffee together, and everything else sort of flowed from there. No, but I mean, Ocasio-Cortez, when she was elected, I'm in her district, and when she was elected in 2018, it was such a phenomenon. I mean, one that the world had kind of seemingly never seen before, at least that I've witnessed. I mean, similar to Barack Obama or Donald Trump, where this woman won a congressional seat and then sort of just seemed to have the world in the palm of her hand. And so I think it was sort of worth it to kind of figure out how we got to this moment and what it all meant. And that was the real sort of motivation for it, and having a sort of front row seat for it, living here in Queens, in her district, and interviewing her as she was campaigning. Not quite as extensively as you did, but a bit at least.
Right. And I mean, the book really dives deep into her background as a person and her early experiences, which I just found, interesting, that stuff I didn't know before. How did her, I guess, personal experiences through college, or just the era that she grew up in, inform your characterization of this new progressive swell as the AOC generation? Because obviously there are a bunch of things. She graduated in the wake of the Great Recession. She experienced political disillusionment with the Obama administration. Also her experiences in the service industry, trying to work in the wake of the Great Recession, which is obviously much maligned by Tucker Carlson, working class hero. So, I mean, how much of that kind of informed your larger extrapolation of what this movement meant?
Yeah, I mean, because, I think one of the reasons she sort of became a superstar in a way is because she kind of symbolized for a lot of people this rising generation, and that they were going to rewrite American politics, American political life, American life in general, and that her election sort of meant that oh, here they are. They've now, arrived onto the scene. And, that generation, which is not mine, to be clear. I mean, she graduated from college in, I think, 2011, right when the sort of, still in the midst of the recession. She had taken a bus home in the middle of college to vote for Barack Obama, and then kind of grew disillusioned with him in a lot of ways. But moved to New York, as many people do after college, after, especially in her case, attending a fairly elite college in Boston University, and then had tried to kind of make it in the world. Just got into sort of startups, started publishing, this kind of thing. In that economy, nothing was really taking with her. And also, her father had died when she was a college, I think, sophomore. And so she felt the need to make money. And so she ended up getting into the service industry. And, she's sort of, and working at a restaurant in the Union Square neighborhood in Manhattan, and tending bar and that kind of thing. I actually since talked to people who sort of remember her as a bartender kind of thing. And I think she had sort of reached a point in her life, and she sort of said as much, where it just seemed like she was kind of stuck in a rut and not really sure how to get out of it. And all of the sort of hopes that she had for herself were kind of not arriving in a way.
Right. And I mean, I think that's, as I say, indicative of larger generational trends. And then, of course, there's the Bernie Sanders campaign, Standing Rock, where she was at. I was there too. Flint, Michigan, these kinds of massive social movements that I think captured people in a way that, I mean, you write about how a lot of protest and political action and energy that existed, say, in the 1960s was just, it slowly died like a battery, right? I mean, we saw anti-apartheid protests and things of that nature. But as neoliberal politics emerged, there was a complete sapping of progressive energy. So I'm just wondering if you could contextualize some of those, those two, Standing Rock, Flint, those two big movements in, I guess, the larger political progressive space.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the sort of interesting things I think about AOC is that her story kind of like tracks the story of the American left in the kind of like pre and post Trump era, however you want to characterize it. And so she kind of hit all of these sort of stations of the cross in her own development in a way, and kind of, went through them as she was both like before she was a candidate, as a young person, working for Bernie, and then later, running for office. Kind of thing. And so what happened in her particular case was that, she got really involved in the Bernie Sanders campaign. That was really her first kind of like political organizing experience. I wouldn't even say she got really involved. I mean, she got involved. She was like a kind of low level canvasser. And then after Trump won, Trump was such a shock to the system. And I think it's really like one of the kind of undercurrents of my book is like it was just like this shock to everybody when Donald Trump won, and everyone was sort of figuring out what to do next. And if you think about like just in the days and weeks after that, you had like, groups like Indivisible form, and people started getting together in living rooms and churches and sort of figuring out what to do next. And Ocasio-Cortez and some of her friends went on a road trip. It was freezing cold, in the middle of December and January, and they drove to Flint, Michigan, and they actually like talked to some of the people that were engaged in some of the work there. And then they went to Standing Rock and they did the same there. And it was on her way kind of coming back from Standing Rock that a group called Brand New Congress reached out to her and talked to her about being a candidate for Congress. And, I just to sort of touches on something you also mentioned is that I think the sort of story of Ocasio-Cortez and the story I tell in the book, in a way, is the story of an American left that's kind of finally realizing that they need to get engaged in the political space and that they need to win power. And that is really her story, and that these kind of like various amorphous marches and, petition drives and Facebook check-ins, they kind of don't count for much in terms of like improving people's lives unless you can achieve power.
Right. And I mean, there's, you talk about Facebook groups, and there's organizing, which helps achieve power. So it's not, just power for power's sake. It's like taking that kind of activist mentality and then actualizing it, for lack of a better word. Talking about achieving power, I think, so much of what's great about your book is you can look at these larger dynamics through this lens. Her race versus Crowley, she was up against an immensely powerful political machine in New York, which was buttressed by an immensely powerful Democratic Party and fundraising apparatus on a national stage, which is so fascinating too. She did have a bit of these it was a two-headed monster in that way, because Crowley had the complete fealty of the New York political machine, which is what I want to transition to once we kind of go over this about Eric Adams and what that means. So talk about that race and what that meant in terms of, one, gaining power, right? But two, knocking down power and powerful institutions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like, people I talked to in the book talked to me about like how the left had kind of been afraid of power in a way. Politics is sort of seen as grubby, right? And it's, you got to make compromises. And then, power is like a kind of almost like a dirty word for many leftists. And so they needed to kind of sort of reorient their thinking in order to get engaged in congressional races in order to win them. And then, and a candidate like Ocasio-Cortez, I mean, she kind of was able to sort of harness all of this leftist energy from groups like Justice Democrats, like Brand New Congress, who I mentioned earlier, Democratic Socialists of America, who got pretty involved in her race, and also by going on left-leaning media programs like the Young Turks and places like that. It was like, and I should also say, here in New York, there was a movement afoot in post-Trump. It's kind of a little complicated, but if you just bear with me, there were this group in the state legislature, the state Senate in particular, who are these elected Democrats who are caucusing with Republicans. And it had been going on for a few years. I've covered Albany a lot. no one really cared about it in the way that most people don't care about like state legislative politics. But after Trump won, all of a sudden everyone woke up and was outraged by this. The local legislator in the district that Ocasio-Cortez ran in ended up becoming one of these lawmakers who sort of left the Democratic caucus to join the Republicans.
The IDC, yeah, we've done so. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so everyone, the IDC, they're called the Independent Democratic Committee Caucus, something like that. And everyone's just sort of outraged by this once they woke up to it. And so she kind of rode that energy in a way to beating Joe Crowley. And the old kind of machine politics of New York had never seen anything like this coming.
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about the old machine there. I want to get to that again with Eric Adams because we just got the news that he's going to be the Democratic nominee and very likely the new mayor. But, you know, just in terms of the national stage, what's your opinion on how the, you know, old generation does seem to be clinging to power, you know, the I don't even want to say old generation, but yes, the old generation. And how is there going to be a shift there? What has to give for somebody like Ocasio-Cortez and newer, you know, Justice Democrats, brand new Congress folks to take power there? Because despite the significance of this race in terms of looking at the American left, there's a lot of obstacles that are still in the way of kind of a progressive takeover in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously the biggest one is to sort of win seats. And some of the people that were behind Ocasio-Cortez's run, this group called Justice Democrats, who are often sort of called the kind of Tea Party of the left. But I think they're actually a lot savvier than that because they only tend to run in these safe urban districts that are very diverse, and they're represented by kind of older, mostly white, but certainly moderate lawmakers. And they focused on those and thinking that if you just can like win a handful of those, you can kind of remake the Congress. And they've certainly done that. I mean, now the Justice Dems, it's like, I think it's sort of like the squad writ large, but they're like a decently sized political force. I mean, there's maybe 9 or so of them, which isn't bad in a 215 person body. And so that's the first thing. I mean, I think that the kind of way in which American politics is set up right now and probably for the future is going to limit their power when it comes to kind of that negotiating bills and leverage and all this stuff, just because my read on it is it always seems like the moderates have this advantage where you can't, like, the left wing of the party is not going to walk away from half a loaf. If it means getting half of the population Medicare, it means half of an infrastructure bill, if it means like half of a child allowance kind of thing. And so they kind of don't have leverage in that sense. What they do have leverage in, and what makes Ocasio-Cortez so effective, particularly for someone who is just a second-term lawmaker, is they do control this sort of national media spotlight, and they do control the media narrative, you know, and they can, I mean, Ocasio-Cortez in her first year in office was on like RuPaul's Drag Race, right? So they're the ones who can kind of like, I think in general, sort of frame and shape the debate, even if they don't have a lot of influence on how the actual sausage then gets made.
Because then when the sausage gets made, you have Hakeem Jeffries, who has taken over Crowley's old leadership position, who is starting a super PAC to combat the Justice Democrats.
Right.
I mean, there is the old guard, right, where, of course, it's obviously Steny Hoyer, Pelosi. They're older in age and also part of the old guard. But then you have ideological equivalents like Hakeem Jeffries coming up, who are going to take that mantle whenever Pelosi or Hoyer retire. I mean, how do you combat that?
I mean, I think that's difficult, because I think that, you know, one thing we've seen is that communities of color, and we'll get into this when we talk about the mayor's race in here in New York, perhaps, have not been as amenable to that kind of messaging from the Justice Dems, from some of the left-leaning aspects of the party. And we're seeing this kind of divide where, you know, whiter but still diverse neighborhoods and districts end up electing these kind of, you know, very left-leaning lawmakers. And then, you know, mostly communities of color end up electing mostly moderate lawmakers. And so I think something kind of will have to crack that apart, and it's hard to see precisely what that is right now.
So then that's a great transition to the victory of Eric Adams, which Democrats on the national stage, or him himself, have declared as he said he was with the new face of the Democratic Party. We did an extensive interview on Peacock about this, but I want to kind of go over the same territory here just for the Majority Report regular audience. Who this guy is. He's a centrist. He ran as a centrist and seems to be a part of the same machine that Ocasio-Cortez and others, including, you know, getting rid of the IDC, they've helped defeat. But he's a unique character in many ways, with a unique set of problems, including a Trumpian kind of a propensity to lie, and potentially there's some legal iffiness when it comes to some of the properties that he owns and rents out. Let's, I guess, just start with his origins as a politician and kind of how that fits into this narrative of a progressive upswing in New York and nationally as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's someone who's a little bit hard, I think, to put into a box in a way. But he is definitely presenting himself as a kind of answer to some of this progressive left-wing energy, and saying, you know, essentially stop, and it was wrong. And that what voters, what Democratic primary voters want is someone like him, who is, on the one hand, you know, tough on crime, pro-charter school, but also pro-labor union, and does focus on, I think, the material needs of poor and disenfranchised communities. All that said, he's a former police officer. That's where he got his start, really, in the sort of civic life of the city. And he very quickly became a kind of outspoken reformer within the police department. But in this way, he was on the one hand calling for police to be more mindful of the way they treat the communities they police, but also for those communities to be more respectful of the police. A lot of police officers who served with him really disliked him and thought he was kind of a showboat and a show off. He was a Republican in the mid-90s. He was also a supporter of Louis Farrakhan. He flew to Indiana to accompany Mike Tyson when he was released from prison. Something that got him into trouble with the police department because it was seen as associating with a known felon. Which is sort of against police department regulations. He ended up running for the state Senate as a Democrat. And during this time where, you know, as you mentioned, some of the Democrats kind of like left the party and caucused with Republicans, he was never one of those. Although his protege, who replaced him in the state Senate, did join the Republicans. And I talked to people who sort of saw him as kind of having one foot in kind of both camps a lot of the time, where he was officially a Democrat, but at least seen as sort of friendly to the Republicans and to those breakaway Democrats.
Well, he's also just been the subject of many controversies, including backing a friend of his in the state Senate who was accused of, I think, slashing his girlfriend or his significant other. He also, as I mentioned, currently, there's a question as to, one, if he even lives in New York, and the properties that he rents out in New York City, the income from that seems to be entirely unaccounted for. And he has made up a variety of lies about who he is or what he's done, or that seem to be lies. You can't verify them, but one about him being a valedictorian, that or he should have been valedictorian, but he wasn't. I mean, these sound silly, but when you add all of them up, it paints a picture of kind of a shadowy, not so truthful politician who is of the political machine that, as we say, the left in New York has made great gains in its fight against.
Yeah, I mean, he's either had the most interesting life anyone has ever imagined, or there's some fudging going on, because he often, when he's in front of a microphone, will tell some story that will leave people just wonder, like, what are you talking about? Like, as you mentioned, he was had the best grades in his police academy class, highest GPA, but they gave the valedictorian award to somebody else, which is just like, why would they do that? I mean, it just seems like a weird thing to happen. He said that he, as a police officer, he was off duty and he broke up an anti-Asian hate crime in the 90s, which was, again, like something he just sort of brought up at a debate. He's talked about, providing airfare, bus fare for children who are caught up in sex trafficking. But he's never really talked about it until he was running for office, when he did talk about it. And so it's kind of hard to know much about the bio of the guy. He did appear to not live in New York City by many accounts. He had a townhouse in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood of Brooklyn, which he had said that he rented out to such a, and got so much money from the rental income that he paid his son's way through college with that rental income. He never actually disclosed that income to the IRS. He said it was because he was doing repairs on the townhouse, but he never disclosed the repairs. He then also owned another apartment in another part of Brooklyn with a former partner, and he was using it as an official address for his campaign documents and other things up until last year. He said that he signed over the house, the apartment, to his former girlfriend in 2005, even though he was continuing to use it in 2020. And again, also never filed that with the IRS. So it's really hard to know. It's certainly like a colorful background and story. And it's hard to know what to make of all of this. It's hard to know what, the actual authorities who have to keep an eye on these kind of things will make on all this once more of it comes to light.
Yeah, I mean, we have a video of him that will eventually play after we are finished speaking, where he got his ear pierced the other day as a part of a bet. But yeah, I mean, he's just incredibly colorful, and he's definitely going to bring us a lot of viral clips. So like, he won in as poorer areas. I think it was like the South Brooklyn, or I mean, what were some of the areas, some of the Bronx, like more of the outer boroughs he had success in, which I guess, runs counter to some of the narratives that progressives at least want to tell themselves, or what was the somewhat anomalous success of Ocasio-Cortez's campaign in New York 14, of areas that are lower income and majority minority. She was a progressive candidate, but they voted for this, tough on crime guy who he ran a campaign, what was it, in the early 2000s, about pull your pants up, or putting secret cameras in kids' bedrooms to see where they were hiding drugs. Like, he seemed to be appealing to older voters of color, maybe parents who wanted crime to improve in their area and spoke in this kind of way. But in terms of policy, certainly his tough on crime stance is not in keeping with, as we talk about, larger progressive movements in a city that is one of the most progressive in the country. Just how do you square those things? How do you characterize the candidacy within that context?
Yeah, it's a great question. So he won in central Brooklyn, and he won in Southeast Queens, and really, swamped the vote in that area. I think in a lot of ways, I don't think we always appreciate this necessarily, but I think especially in these like urban political environments, like a mayor's race, I think identity concerns end up mattering almost as much as ideology. And that makes a lot of sense. Like, for poor and traditionally dispossessed communities, they are going to want someone that looks like them, someone that comes from those neighborhoods into high office. I mean, that's quite an achievement. And so, he was sort of the most prominent African-American candidate running, and he was able to get the vast majority of African-American support. But I don't know if like a more progressive Black candidate wouldn't have actually done better or just as well. in those neighborhoods. He certainly made crime a big focus, and also, I mean, but also talked about police reform, and never sort of described those things as being really in competition with each other. And we'll have to see how that works. I mean, he's someone who's sort of spoken. On the one hand, he's kind of always is kind of a little bit all over the place, but he's someone who was suing to end stop and frisk, who which is the police practice here that kind of faded out under Mike at the end of Mike Bloomberg's mayoralty.
No, he was forced to by the courts, but yeah.
Forced by the courts, yeah. But he also, he's also talked about like reinstituting it, and Adams has spoken favorably of it. He's talked about instituting this plainclothes anti-crime unit that was disbanded because they were involved in like too many kind of horrific incidents. So I think it's going to be hard to kind of square that circle, but he really did make crime a focus of his campaign. And, he was backed by some very like reactionary forces in the city, including the New York Post. He was spoken favorably of on multiple occasions by Fox News, by Tucker Carlson,
by Rudy Giuliani.
By Rudy Giuliani, right. And if you'll recall, there was these, there was this, every shooting is horrific, obviously. There's like a random shooting in Times Square a few months ago, and he held a press conference immediately afterwards, and then held another press conference like a few hours after that, which is kind of making crime the salient issue of the election.
Yeah, and I just for comedy's sake, I'm just wondering if you could describe those ads that he did. It also just speaks to who he is as a person, and this tough on crime thing. Even though he described himself as a police reformer, he did try to reform within the system. But the dominant through line, if there is one with this guy who seems to lie about everything, is tough on crime, and like those corny ads, which are bizarre.
Are you talking about from earlier in his career?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so he started a Stop the SAG campaign when he was a state lawmaker, which was designed. It was like billboards in his district and I think all around the city, using obviously state money to get young men to pull their pants up. He then cut I guess you call it a PSA. It ended up on YouTube of teaching parents how to search their kids' rooms for guns and drugs, which includes things like taking out the books and shaking them, and like checking the back of a doll that may be on a bed and seeing if the child is hiding, cocaine in the diaper of the doll or something. And it was, they were really embarrassing to state lawmakers, to Democrats at the time, who just thought that they were just always kind of silly. And a lot of his initiatives that he's taken on as Brooklyn Borough president have been kind of similarly silly in a way, where it's about, he'll, unveil a new contraption that's about teaching, about how they're going to drown rats in a bucket of poison or something. I mean, all these things that are just, they seem sort of stunty in a way. It's hard to know when he is in a position of sort of real responsibility, what will happen with all that kind of thing. Because it's all very reactive, right? It's all very like something's in the news. I'm going to do a kind of like stunty thing to get into the news cycle, which is not really quite what the job of being mayor is.
Yeah. And in my experience, honestly, that kind of performative attempts to get in the news, it doesn't portend well for lawmaking or leadership. Again, I think about Trump or Cuomo or whatever the case may be. I'm curious, I know this is not New York City anymore, but just in terms of New York State, India Walton, how you see her victory in the primary in Buffalo in this context. She's a socialist and proudly so, and she won her primary in Buffalo, and that was one of the many successes by New York DSA, which has been more successful than other DSA chapters throughout the country. Not saying that other DSA chapters haven't done good work, but I guess curious about how you'd characterize that victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to sort of remember, one always has to remember that all of these races, like, they take place in their own context, and you can then sort of overread them from what, you know, and try to like extrapolate about them. But like Eric Adams was running against 7 other people, really, right? And so like he beat them. And Dear Walton was running against a longtime mayor of Buffalo, who had sort of, you know, popularity had sunk. I think he had barely won re-election the last time, and they were able to kind of fill the vacuum there. DSA and other sort of left-leaning outfits in a very low turnout primary context, and so she won. You know what that sort of means for like really anything beyond the context of that election, I think it can be a little hard to say.
Right. And so, I mean, lastly, I think that's kind of the same analysis we can bring to the, so now I feel like I sound hypocritical. I do think Ocasio-Cortez's race was more indicative of a national movement than, you know, Eric Adams or even Walton's win, not taking away from that in terms of leftist power and what that meant. But I mean, how do we then say at the same time that Eric Adams is wrong to say that he's the new face of the Democratic Party based on his very specific victory here in New York against, you know, AOC endorsed Maya Wiley at the 11th hour. There was really no competent leftist candidate or organizing effort behind any of them when Scott Stringer, when those allegations, which have now been have fallen apart, they derailed his campaign significantly. And it's just odd. There was no infrastructure in the city to combat a guy like Adams.
Yeah, I mean, right. Again, it's sort of like the specific context of the race. I mean, I think had Ocasio-Cortez run for mayor, I think she probably would have won, or she would have done very well. I think had Jumaane Williams, who's another left-leaning city politician, he's elected citywide, public advocate, I think he could have possibly run. I mean, Eric Adams, the day after the election, said, I'm the face of a new Democratic Party, or the new face of the Democratic Party, or he would like to be that, obviously. I mean, everybody sort of thinks their election heralds the dawn of a new age. I mean, in AOC's congressional run, it was like, first of all, she wasn't alone. And it was kind of surrounded by all of this other stuff happening that I think really you could make the case that it was. And in Adams's case, I mean, he was endorsed by almost every major labor union in the city. He was endorsed by a lot of elected officials, a lot of political clubs. Mayor Bill de Blasio was quietly pulling strings behind him. He raised a ton of money from real estate interests, and he won by a single point against a candidate, Catherine Garcia, who had none of that, who had never run for office before, who had almost no campaign staff, who had no endorsements other than from newspaper editorial boards, very limited money, very inexperienced campaigner. Like, she was the city sanitation commissioner last year. Congrats to Eric Adams. He very smartly secured his base and rode that to victory. But let's not pretend that this is a huge mandate by any means. I mean, the guy won by a single point when, 2 other left-leaning candidates' campaigns collapsed for various reasons.
Very lastly, do you see this Republican challenger against him in the general going anywhere? We talk about Mayor Eric Adams, or does he even make it there? I'm a little worried that some of these investigations into his, if there are any investigations launched into him not paying taxes on some of these properties, who knows where that goes? But
yeah, I mean, so I don't know how well your audience is familiar with Curtis Lee, or the Republican running, but I can safely say he's a clown. I mean, he's a total clown. He's a guardian. It's this group called a guardian angel who he wears this red beret, and they were supposed to patrol the subways in the 1980s and 90s. He lives in a studio with 15 cats. He's like a guy who, is on he's kind of like a shock jock radio drive time guy. I agree with you. These issues that have come up about Adams' taxes and residence are to me, a huge flashing red light. I don't see how we ever get around them. I don't know when all that is brought to bear, but boy, that is something he will have to sort out if he is going to ever be mayor of New York City.
Well, David Freedlander, thank you so much for talking to us today and giving us the colorful details of New York City politicians like Eric Adams. It was very helpful. And of course, talking about your book, The AOC Generation, How Millennials Are Seizing Power and Rewriting the Rules of American Politics. Thank you so much, David, for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be talking a little bit more about Haiti. Be right back. So we're getting more information, but still not a ton about the assassination of Haitian President Moïse, which happened not yesterday, but I believe in the dead of night leading up to yesterday, which has sent shockwaves throughout the country, understandably so. And it's also particularly relevant when looking at U.S. empire, because U.S. foreign policy with Haiti has been long, it's been bloody, it's been colored by fears of Black liberation, and of course, U.S. imperialism and economic dominance. We've been interfering with Haiti throughout its country's history, and of course, it's always about exerting U.S. hegemony and global dominance at all costs, particularly for our economic interests, as I say. We had a journalist, Jeremy Scahill, on a few months ago or weeks ago. He dubbed Joe Biden the empire politician, and that's evident in this 1994 clip. Is that what year this is? 90s clip at the very least, of Biden talking about Haiti within the context of U.S. interests. I think this is relevant just given how the U.S. is going to respond to this power vacuum in Haiti, and was there any United States involvement despite the U.S. propping up Moïse for many years, and other members of the bourgeoisie. Let's take a listen, though, to Biden some years ago talking about Haiti.
Y'all went into Grenada for 40, 100, 70, not 500 medical students. And here there are thousands of blacks being persecuted, killed, death squads, and you're not doing anything. Clearly, Haiti is no more or less in the interest of the United States than Grenada. So what you have, for example, a leading editor of a paper in the Delaware Valley asked their reporters to come down and talk to me and said, why is Biden so concerned about Bosnia and not about Haiti? Is it because blacks are involved in Haiti? Blacks are what at stake in Haiti, and in Bosnia they are Europeans, whites. There is that notion abroad in the Congress, in the country. It's not substantially different than when Lech Walesa came along and all the polls in the state of Delaware and the United States of America focused, or when Israel is in trouble and the American Jewish community and those who believe strongly in Israel focus. Or you can list throughout our history circumstances where our multi-ethnic community looks to things happening in a constituency that they are from, represent, or feel having a stake in. So if Haiti, a god-awful thing to say, if Haiti just quietly sunk into the Caribbean or rose up 300 feet, it wouldn't matter a whole lot in terms of our interest.
Well, so that clip was circulating about Haiti falling into the sea, and a lot of people who are supporters of Joe Biden said that it was taken out of context. But I'm not sure contextualizing it with how we view nations and helping them as purely an effort to exert U.S. hegemony. I'm not sure how much that makes a difference, Matt. Oh,
I want to make yeah, okay. Yeah, the idea that Israel and Bosnia we're only interested in those countries because like people on the ground here have organized along ethnic lines to make us. No, those have imperial significance for us. And also like the idea that we've not been interested in what Haiti's been doing. We've not been interested in helping them. We've been interested in, like, say 1995 when the IMF was telling them to privatize major national industries, and when Bill Clinton was telling them to lower sugar and rice tariffs so that those agriculture workers can go instead work in textile factories. So we do care about Haiti, just as a place to exploit and beat down.
Yes, and also, as you know, we talked about some sort of representative in the region that is going to prop up, say, U.S. foreign policy in Latin America, where the United States was gleeful that Moise, who has now passed, was fully behind them in propping up Guaido as the leader of Venezuela, which was not true. And you mentioned Bill Clinton there. I mean, Haiti and the relationship with Bill Clinton after his presidency too, with the Clinton Foundation and the way that they tried to reimagine Haiti after the devastating earthquake that really just ravaged the country. It was just so indicative of the neoliberal project, remaking it in a way that was profitable to the Clinton orbit, which he did as president and he did after president. And then, you know, another point to make too about Moise and our relationship with Haiti is that it's spans administrations. You had Obama upholding Moise, who really was a member of industry. He made his money crookedly with fruit exports, I believe. And then when Obama left, Trump upheld him as well. And Biden seemingly had, we don't know of any U.S. involvement in this, but if he was assassinated with United States involvement, it was just because he became so problematic that the United States could no longer support him because he was becoming more of a liability for the neoliberal project than an asset anymore, because there were so many protests against him.
Yeah, ultimately, and if you could mute while I'm
yeah.
Ultimately, like Biden mentions death squads in that old clip, right? And Moise has been using and directing death squads, and when you get involved in that sort of business, it sometimes doesn't end well with those when you make deals with those kind of folks. I mean, we're not sure exactly what happened, but I'm just saying, like, this has been a long-term problem, and America was supporting people who let that problem fester.
Yeah, it's funny that Biden mentions death squads in that context, as if the United States isn't instrumental to the propagation of death squads internationally. But that is our show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. That's what I say to the guests. But you're all guests, audience. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you tomorrow. Unless you're hanging out with us a little bit longer, we are going to head into the fun half. We're gonna have a lot of fun times in the fun half. Did I say fun? Matt, what is happening on Left Reckoning? And damn, I'm like, now that we're back in studio, I guess I'll mute when you're talking so it doesn't pick up.
Yeah, it's a weird echo. But last night, Austin Gonzalez of Machete Mate came to talk about some amazing work he's been doing with DSA folks, going to both Peru and Venezuela on democracy outreach missions. We had a great talk about particularly the political dynamics in Peru and the rewriting of a Fujimori constitution, I would say, is a good example of things that can be done when you really get the left to take over power, per our interview today. So check out that last night, and it's going to be on Wednesdays at 8 Eastern from now on. Left Reckoning, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get our post game where we talk about Donnie Deutsch and some other people like that.
And don't forget to check out the Noma Key show. She has new hours, which I'm forgetting at this current juncture. And we have Brandon Sutton here to plug Discourse. Where is he? There's Brandon. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Brandon. I don't know if he can hear us.
Brandon. All right. Well, we got Binder coming up though, so he can plug Doomed.
Hey, Binder, you there?
I am now here. Hello, everybody. How are y'all doing today?
We're doing lovely. How about yourself, and how about Doomed?
Oh, Doomed is doing great tonight at youtube.com/Matt Binder at around 9 p.m. Eastern time. Well, I don't know why I said around. At 9 p.m. Eastern time. I guess I usually do start a little bit late, but be there at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I will have on Michael Edison Hayden of Southern Poverty Law Center, and we will be talking about his latest report on Twitter's ties to various far-right figures. The report really goes into detail specifically about Jack Dorsey, Twitter's CEO, and the various connections he has to figures on the right. And, why so many figures on the far right, some who have been banned on other social media platforms, are not only still on Twitter, which is one decision, but are also still verified figures on Twitter, which is another completely bizarre decision. That's tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Subscribe now while you're right here on YouTube, so you don't, if you're watching live on the live stream, so you don't miss out.
Yes, do that. And Brandon, what's happening over on the Discourse?
Hello. Today, I think we're going to have a series of interviews or a series of podcasts placed onto our Discourse by John with his interview with a Black Left AF on Twitter. And we're also going to have another episode for patrons coming up by, end of today, tomorrow. We took the 4th of July off. We're very patriotic over in the Discourse. A lot of patriots in our ranks. Unfortunately.
Did you partake in the Claire McCaskill tradition of watching January 6th footage?
Oh, I did not, instead I just stood for about 12 hours saluting a flag until my feet started to bleed, until passed out from dehydration, like all good Americans should.
Yes, well, I mean, if you didn't do it in the Walmart, I don't really give a shit, so. Anyway, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. Binder, can you please do the phones today? Bye.
Oh, yeah, sure, no problem.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. back. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total
pussy.
We are back. I was still eating some cashews, as is the way. Matt?
Oh, wait, we're back? I thought you meant you're back. Like you just came back.
No,
Was
we are
also
back,
still
back.
chewing.
Oh, we're back. Oh, hello, everybody. We're back.
Brandon, what are you eating?
I was having a protein bar.
Of course.
You guys don't follow the rules of broadcasting. You're not supposed to eat these type of things but right before you're on air, first of all, and then definitely not when you're on air. Come on, guys.
Well, I'm on air for 2.5 hours. My blood sugar is not in a place to accept that. Although somehow like Sam can do that, and not even have lunch. I'm not quite there yet. My body's still training.
I'm the bad boy of streaming, and also I guess R&B. In the sense that I do all I break all the rules. I do math live, whatever.
Do math
okay.
live. No, go ahead. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry guys, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with Matt's mic, unfortunately. But let's get into some clips, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
So Tucker Carlson had Matt Walsh on, and I mentioned this on the show the other day. Their obsession with putting cameras in the classrooms of teachers who they think might be teaching critical race theory, it's a bit of a twofer for them because they can also subtly suggest that the teachers are pedophiles or of that sort. It's a dog whistle to the QAnon people, and Matt Walsh seemed to agree on Twitter the other day, and Tucker had him on to complete this project where he made some not so subtle allusions to that idea on Tucker's show. Let's take a listen.
No. I mean, look, let's be totally blunt here. Most teachers are great. I'm married to a former teacher. I'm not against teachers, but some teachers are creepy. And we know that because they want to talk to other people's prepubescent kids about sex in pretty detailed ways. You're a creep if you do that. Let's just be totally clear about it. So anyone who'd want to talk to like a third grader about sex practices, don't you think we need to have a camera on that person?
Yeah, I forgot that was Tucker that said that, right? So, yeah, I guess he just needed Matt Walsh there as a human prop to allude that, teachers are creepy. They want to talk to third graders about sex. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the reality. But if you're trying to cultivate a certain audience that has a certain amount of anxiety about children being outside of the home because maybe they're at daycare and the mothers aren't there with them, and the mothers should be staying at home, then you're going to make this kind of argument to create that kind of panic, and then also activate conservatives on a very granular level where they're so invested in the school board, which also means they're probably invested in state elections and congressional elections, etc.
I just want to say that the idea that the teachers are creepy for third grade, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what grade I was in when I learned. I think the furthest back I can remember is 5th grade is when we may have started sex education at a very basic level.
Same.
But the idea that teachers teaching their students about sex education is creepy, but these two adult men discussing putting cameras in the classrooms so they can log in and watch children is not creepy. Excuse me? I mean, excuse me, really? Now I have 2 kids and my son is in school. My daughter is not of school age yet, but my son is in school. And I can tell you that anything that requires even a photograph, like, a school concert, anything that the school does requires the parents, each child in the class to give their explicit permission to allow their child to even be in that photograph. And if not, then they either don't do it or they have to not put the children in the photographs or even blur certain children out. So the idea that you'd be able to put live stream cameras in a classroom and every parent will just be cool with some other parent who they don't know logging in and spying on their kids is ridiculous.
Yeah, I just want. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, these guys are participating in a sex panic. That's what this behavior is right now. Like the idea that, like you were saying, Matt, I'm not a parent, but I have heard that, like, actually the problem in America is we are too avoidant about discussing sex in this country with children, so that they don't know, for instance, like you need to broach the topic so kids need to know, can say, like, I shouldn't be touched like that, for instance, right? Like, this is actually a counter creep measure that we are able to, like, not be, like prudism serves that sort of, like, keeping those things quiet, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I just.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brandon. Everyone keeps.
No, you can reply first. There's no problem. I just want to really echo
no, seriously, go ahead. I can get going right after you. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to echo what everyone is saying, starting with Emma. I think it's, really astute to point out, I happen to be an expert on the suburban demographic as a lifetime movie club subscriber. I happen to be an expert on that demographic. And I think what you're seeing is that the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Matt Walshes of the world, just like with the anti-vaxxer talk, they're trying to prey on this sort of anxiety that the suburban, suburban older boomer demographic has about the, women out of the workplace, your children being taken care of by strangers, the same kind of anxieties you see in those Lifetime movies where, like, the babysitter turns out to be a child trafficker. And, they're inciting a sex panic, but there have always been sex panics revolving around people's kids, going back to the satanic panic, the babysitter panics of the 80s and all those various other things. But they're using it very specifically to try to, drive this wedge between, people like this next generation and new forms of knowledge. I'm not an expert on pedagogy or like young childhood development, but there are some people who are experts who are designing this curriculum, not as much as they should be, but theoretically they have some expertise in it. And this is being used by Tucker Carlson and Matt Walsh to extricate this next generation from an environment where they're probably learning about race, they're probably mingling with people of different races, different religions, and try to get them back into a bubble where they're going to be more susceptible to the kind of things that Fox News and other Fox News type shows are pushing. You don't want kids learning about race too young, or learning that, like, being gay too young and being exposed to that is okay, because then by the time they're 20 and 30, they're going to be more and more resistant to, like, the PragerU Fox News universe. And they're savvy enough to know that. And they're also savvy enough to know that there are these, like, sexual anxieties that exist in the hearts of these suburban people that make them easy to prey on, but that they're not really aimed at that, because they want to teach your kids about sex too. They just want to teach them the wrong stuff about it.
Right. Like, what do they think is going on in sex ed classes too? Like, do they think teachers, like, advocate or, like, coerce or promote children having sex? Like, the idea, like, I remember some parts of my various sex ed class and just feeling like, not specifics, but I remember learning and feeling like, oh man, I never want to do that, because you learn about, like, the health implications. You learned about, like, the AIDS epidemic. You learned about STDs, and it's like, when you're young, you're like, well, I'm just going to keep away from that. At least, it's sort of, I don't want to. It gives you a whole understanding of what that it all is. So I don't get what they actually think is going on. Like, do they think the teachers are, like, handing out condoms and saying, "Go at it, kids. This is fun"? Like, what do they think is going on?
Largely speaking, they're blocking that in most places. They've been, waging a war against sex ed for as long as I have been aware of sex ed as a person. I'm only I'm only 30. And so for as long as I've been having sex ed, I've been hearing about like parents and teachers and, church groups waging a war against it. And at the end of the day, it again fits into that kind of anti-vaxxer mindset, fits into the kind of like anti-mask mindsets. This is a public health issue. We have strains of STIs that are becoming more and more antibiotic resistant. We have new methods of transmission, and this is about controlling and making sure public health knowledge is available so that we can tamp down on public health crises. But they're not concerned about that. They're concerned about like what their audience and how they cultivate an audience that is more and more resistant to any kind of social dynamism.
The weirdest thing, though, is they currently do have a whole campaign going on with critical race theory and parents showing up at these school board meetings in mass, arguing against it. Like, they already have one campaign attacking teachers. Why not just roll the cameras in there and be like, we got to make sure teachers aren't teaching critical race theory? Why bring a whole new thing into it?
That's the origin of it. But then you have to, as like Brandon was saying, you have to include those suburban and then downstream from that QAnon type anxieties. It makes it a lot more poignant, especially, when you mobilize mothers and parents who think that their kids are being indoctrinated or are susceptible to sexual predation or predatory behavior. That's why he lowered the age. I got sex ed, I think, starting in 6th grade too. That's why he lowered it to 3rd grade, because then you fear for your very small children it's not just that they're going to be indoctrinated to hate themselves and hate that they're white. They're also going to be molested. And that's really what he's trying to say on his top-rated news program.
Yeah, I think, Emma hit the nail on the head. Moral panics like that come and go. Whatever happens to be the anxiety of the time is going to be what's going to be put forth first and foremost. And now we're in the middle of the BLM uprisings. We're in the middle of like this conversation on police brutality. And so the conversation about race is just what on people's mind. But I think the goals of the far right are the same. They're trying to attack this, in many ways, this imagined version of what public school is, which is that like this radical bastion where like leftist teachers are indoctrinating your kids. And when in reality, it's mostly just a place where people are in our society and societal norms are socially reproduced. But in their minds, those like little, in sort of that this little influx of like critical race theory, which again is a red herring for the same kind of anxieties that sex ed were a red herring for, which is like diversity, the sexual liberation of women, the inclusion of minorities into spaces where they otherwise weren't allowed. But like, for the most part, they're just afraid at these small gestures towards diversity that are just necessary by nature of demographic shifts, like in marketing, are going to lead to them and their ideals becoming more and more marginalized, which it will. They're right in that it will, but it's important that we speak to that being their true anxiety, not any critical race theory or sex ed, just the fact that they're afraid that kids are going to have Black friends at school, they're going to have gay friends at school, and they're not going to, wake up and want to watch Tucker Carlson after that, because they're going to think that like they're people. Sorry.
Right. I will say I saw Matt Walsh tweet through this after he was on Tucker Carlson, because I guess he realized that everyone was the tables were turned and everyone was questioning why he wanted to spy on other people's children in the classroom. And he ended up almost completely backtracking, but his final thing was like, I just need the audio then. I don't need the video feed. Just give me an audio feed of inside the classrooms. These guys.
My Chris Hansen senses are tingling. I'm sure, everyone's was, but they have like the far right is known for these incredibly weird psychosexual obsessions. They want to go into women's bathrooms and check under all the skirts to make sure that they have the right genitals. And it's all very creepy, but usually they're allowed to, in, mainstream circles, pretend that it's coming from a righteous place because sometimes they put their hands on the Bible and then, then they do it. But that's neither here nor there.
If we actually put, audio recorders into the schools, all I'd find is like say a AP history class that talks about like Native American dispossession. Is it's gonna like I went to those classes. It both sides is those topics, right? Like Like, you're not going to find anything super extreme. It's actually going to give more evidence to people like us and say, hey, we're whitewashing the Confederacy here.
Well, I mean, like, this is the entire anxiety behind the premise of the movie God's Not Dead 2, which I've seen clips of just from morbid curiosity, where
yeah, sure, clips.
Yes, right. The evil ACLU, Melissa Joan Hart, is a high school teacher who mentions that Martin Luther King was a reverend and doesn't call him doctor, and the ACLU gets her fired from her job, and
good.
Like, yeah,
good.
right,
I can say it. Good.
So they're really bizarrely worried about specific kinds of indoctrination in the classroom, and it's been that way for a while.
Explain that one, Clarissa.
We should play the trailer for God's Not Dead 2. I know that maybe this is off topic, but I feel like it's instructive to the audience.
I feel like I've seen it. I've definitely seen the one for God's Not Dead 1 and God's Not Dead 3, but I might have missed the middle one.
You might have missed God's Not. Well, people
one was
always
Kevin
say
Sorbo,
it's like,
right?
They're
like
all
why
Kevin
the-
Sorbo, I think. It's a trilogy.
It's why the Two Towers is the best one, though, right? The meat of the trilogy is always the best.
Yeah, let's see what
I
boys
actually
gonna
thought
ask.
you were saying that they called God's Not Dead 2 the Two Towers.
Oh, Jesse Metcalf is in this? It's
In
great.
this day and age, people seem to forget that the most basic human right of all is the right to believe.
No prayers, no moments of silence, nothing.
Think of the other children out there who are subjected to their repressive belief system.
If we sit by and do nothing, the pressure that we're feeling today will mean persecution tomorrow. We're at war.
What makes nonviolence so radical is its unwavering commitment to a nonviolent approach.
Isn't that sort of like what Jesus meant when he said that we should love our enemies?
Yes, you have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
One of your students sent a text to their parents. Did this happen?
If you're asking whether I responded to a student's question, yes.
And your answer incorporated the words of Jesus.
What were you thinking, Grace?
The Tholies are asking that you be fired, plus revocation of your teaching certificate.
How do we make this go away and not get blood on our hands?
We let the ACLU do it.
We're going to prove once and for all that God is dead.
I'm the order in the matter of Thorley versus Wesley.
Mr. Kane will insist faith isn't on trial here, but that is exactly what is on trial.
You're looking to prove that Jesus Christ existed? Oh, that's ridiculous. I hate what people like your clients stand for and what they're doing to our society.
You're under arrest.
These people, they're looking to destroy you. Everyone's telling me to stay out of it. What is your heart telling you to do?
I would rather stand with God and be judged by the world than stand with the world and be judged by God. I am not going to be afraid to say the name Jesus.
Yeah, we
my
don't.
God.
You know, I hate to say it, I was a big fan of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and that just that breaks my
Same.
heart a little bit inside. You know, Buffy would never, I hope, be involved in something like that.
Wow, I
but
did not
you know,
notice that. Who that
I
was.
will say, what's there? What?
I didn't notice who that was. Sabrina.
Yeah, I mean, not the new one, obviously, but the movies like that always make oppressing Christians look so fun because they're always just like very dramatic, and it's like the tone is all I don't know what you call it, like intense.
Right.
But they respond very funnily. The drama of it, it's like oh my gosh, maybe we should be doing this.
Isn't that actor? Didn't he play the devil before? And so they're literally casting somebody who, you know, like what's the name of that actor? He's really good. Who plays the ACLU lawyer?
Which one's the ACLU lawyer? Is it the older guy or the young guy?
The older guy.
But the ACLU would defend, you know, the right to like speech. Wouldn't they?
Yes, they would. But the problem is that they're saying it's indoctrinating the children into Christianity. So that's.
Seems like you guys haven't been paying attention to the new woke ACLU because this is actually on their docket.
That's Ray Wise though for people.
Yeah, it's Ray Wise.
He rocks.
He plays
Right,
the
that's
devil in a
what-
lot of
yeah.
things, I feel.
He's definitely the best, right? And so they literally cast the guy who's played the devil in multiple things to play the ACLU lawyer. All right. Well,
I just want to say one more thing about. I think teachers should be able to like. I think it'd be very impressive if teachers can quote Jesus. I think it's problematic if they quote Jesus as in like this is the the Son of God, and right, like I think you should be able to have comparative religion studies. I think that's great. I don't think anybody have a problem with that.
Oh, you do think that, Matt? Well, I'll see you in court.
Well, I mean, she was also in the clip quoting God to kind of like insinuate an argument for the general promotion of social justice and welfare. The right doesn't use God for that at all. So, I mean, that's just
right?
Just like,
yeah.
if a teacher was actually doing that in like, in a classroom, they would be trying to get her fired, generally speaking.
We could just do one more clip if you guys don't mind, and then we can move on to calls. But
We could put the whole movie on if you want. I like a little riff track action.
Well, I'm not,
Probably a
unfortunately,
little
not
slow.
a clip of that. Not a clip of that, unfortunately. I wanted to play this because we had breaking news this morning that the Olympics will not host any fans. We've had guests on this program to talk about how the Olympics moving from city to city decimates the city in many ways, specifically the houseless population, and having the Olympics in the midst of a pandemic makes some of those problems even more intense. There have been protests throughout Tokyo trying to get the Olympic Games canceled, but as of this morning, they have now said that there will no longer be any fans allowed at all at the Olympic Games because a state of emergency, I think, has been declared, at least in Tokyo, because of a new COVID surge. And part of these protests were filmed, including this legendary woman who I couldn't get enough of. She's
good.
I'm not gonna spoil it. Just play the clip. This is the Olympic torch walking by her.
Slow motion, I like that.
Good for her. No, I thought you needed super soaker.
Exactly. She needed a super soaker. She brought just like too little ammo in terms of a water gun to really take down the Olympic torch. So next time, just bring backup at the very least. Wonderful woman, although unfortunately she has been arrested. But I really can't think of a protest action I've enjoyed more in recent memory than taking a squirt gun to the Olympic torch. Just really, really great stuff.
The energy is always appreciated.
Yeah, solidarity with that. I mean, also, I didn't see what happened after that, but if that happened in America, she would have been like, shot or like absolutely like bulldozed by a cop.
Oh, we thought her neon orange and like yellow squirt gun was an AK-47, so off with your head, essentially. But they did use a little riot shield. It was almost designed for water, like a tiny. It was like the size of a sheet of paper that you put in your printer. Just stop it.
They had good
Stop
intel.
it with the water.
Yeah, I mean they should just move the Olympics to Florida. It seems like every sport event will happen down there, and everything anything goes there, right? I mean that's what was going on here.
They should move it to one place if they still want to do, the games. Pay their athletes more. Do it in one place.
They should do it literally in Greece. They should have it back in Greece, or
simple.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. It writes itself. It's very traditional.
Want to take some calls, Binder?
Yeah, let's go to the phones. 215. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 215.
Hey guys, sorry to bother you at work. It's Matt from Philadelphia. How we doing?
Hey, Matt from Phil. I mean, you can't really bother us at work. I mean, we're taking your call as part of our work. So I mean, that's how it goes.
I'm never working, so don't worry about it.
The courtesy. I just wanted to, tread carefully. Speaking of psychosexual obsessions, I wanted to talk to you guys about abortion. I was going to call last week, but Emma wasn't there, and I felt like I shouldn't talk about abortion with just guys.
That's very nice.
I think I hope you appreciate it. So you guys had talked, Emma, I think you and Sam had talked about a Meghan McCain clip a few weeks ago regarding abortion. And I wanted to explain, I think, an argument that I think our side misses a lot of times. And I think it would be more effective in when we talk to people that are coming at pro-life positions, not from not for the purposes of controlling women or religious purposes, but who actually, when they look at a fetus, they see something that's alive to them. And I don't think that's I don't think that's a crazy reaction. Objectively, I think we had to draw a line somewhere, and the Supreme Court drew it at viability, and we had to balance these issues, these concerns of a women's right to control her own body versus the rights of the life growing inside. And so the line got drawn, and now we're on either side. But I think those reasonable people sometimes react negatively to the pro-choice position, because a lot of times I think it's a function of the way of countering the viciousness of the pro-life movement, the right-wingers, that we try to, or we end up downplaying that concern of the life that's growing. And we end up ceding certain ground that I don't think needs to be ceded. I was so starved for social interaction during the quarantine that there were some pro-life protesters that were that they would set up shop outside the Planned Parenthood near where I had a doctor's appointment weekly. So I found myself going up to them to just talk to them, debate them, because I guess I needed social interaction. But the way I came at it with them is I tried to come at it from a completely different angle, because I think, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the facts is, wherever in states where comprehensive sex education is taught and where birth control is available, the unwanted pregnancy rate goes down. And that it's my understanding that it's the unwanted pregnancies rather than women cavalierly just, aborting anytime they get pregnant due to just how much sex they're having. It's really, it's a function of people not understanding how to have responsible sex and all that. And so, these pro-life people are often both anti-abortion, but also comprehensive sex education, comprehensive, child care after the child is born, access to birth control, et cetera. And so the angle I came at it is, no, you may not be pro-abortion, but you are the cause of more abortion than my position. It's your refusal to teach reality to kids. It's your refusal to fund access to birth control. It's your refusal to support families after children are born that is actually leading to more abortions. Because abortion is going to happen no matter what. You can make it illegal. We know they still happen.
And what did they say to that?
I can't read their minds. It wasn't what they were expecting. I got one guy to say, "Oh, I'm gonna look at these studies you say that establish those facts." And then one guy, the one they were just rejecting the facts I was stating. And so if you reject that comprehensive birth or sex education is going to decrease unwanted pregnancies, well then I can't help you, right?
Right.
Yeah, but these were also, the sample size was the true believers, that are protesting Planned Parenthood. And as I said, I'm talking more about, for example, my wife is as progressive as could be. And, I think if push comes to shove, if she had to pull a lever, she would say, okay, you're allowed, abortion is legal. But she has concerns over, that life that's growing, and she recognizes that there needs to be a line drawn. And maybe, I don't know how big that population is, but I just think it's a better angle
Well,
to come from. And it's fun.
There's plenty of people who I'm sure there are plenty of people who believe it should be legal and want it to be legal, but wouldn't do it personally themselves. I mean, that's probably the majority of people who have children and wanted to have a child. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there are many who there are exceptions, but I think interesting story that I don't think the angle is completely new. I'm pretty sure that's I think that's how most people really assume what they're saying. Maybe they're not getting that across when they're saying it, but it's true that the anti-choice people, I don't think we should call them pro-life, because like you said, in your own debate, they are the ones who are responsible for a lot of abortions due to their own ideology, due to their lack of wanting to help people who do go ahead and have children or provide services for pregnant women. I mean, well stated. Thanks for the call.
Adios.
Thank you. Yeah, I will just say, I'm sympathetic to his wife in that, like, I think we had like a mini debate with Sam at one, earlier, or I did, where I basically said that for some women, an abortion can be traumatic, and some women just see it as a medical procedure, and it's just very different from woman to woman, I think. And I have friends who've had abortions and saw it as a medical procedure, and I've had a friend who it was something she struggled with for many years, based on how she was raised. And I was not raised religious at all, but if I had to have an abortion, I think it would be very difficult for me, just based on, the fact that I do want to have kids. So I understand that, I understand why, maybe your wife has that kind of reaction, because it's super personal, but the point is public policy isn't personal, right? And so you have to allow for every kind of, not every kind, I think viability is actually a good line to draw. But you have to allow for all kinds of ideologies and approaches to the situation. And to answer his question about his approach with the anti-abortion activists, the issue is that they're probably not going to look into that information that you told them about, because it's not really about preventing pregnancies. It's about controlling people's bodies, and you're engaging with them on a good faith level, where they're not.
Yeah, no, I agree with Emma. I think ultimately, like, the reasonableness of the opinion or like the position kind of begins and ends with your own personal, decision, and starts to lose reasonableness the more, or how reasonable it is, the more you start applying it to people who aren't you, who you have decided should be adhering to very, let's be honest, arbitrary standards. Because some people, I think it's easy to pretend that this, subsection of the population, religiously motivated or not, are believing this and that this is a standard that is legitimate. But but there are some people out there who think that masturbation is also like a sin and you shouldn't be doing that because it's also a waste of life. And a lot of people who believe that life begins at conception or whatever will look at those people who are further to their left as being crazy and that being a legitimate position. But since we have established a public position, it sort of behooves people to either adhere to it or understand that it may not be there. And understand it may not be theirs, or, understand that like their position is by nature arbitrary. Like, it's not based in any, scientific community doesn't agree, public policy doesn't agree. There are people who believe less zealously than they do. There are people who believe more zealously than they do, right? Who never believe in using protection at all, because that's also a sin. And so, like, if you're not also accounting for the fact that there are people out there who are more religious than you, who view your behavior as sinful, then it's not really so much about like this kind of overwhelming morality. It's more about like, some people are self-righteous. Some people think that it's their job to, assign morality to other people. And just like, Matt said, some people think it should be legal and wouldn't get it. Some people think that it should be illegal and would get it, by nature of like their own personal position. And that's another sort of level to this.
I do want to say, though, especially when it comes to the anti-choice movement, because just from what I've seen, it does seem like there are a lot of young people who are sort of brainwashed in that. So I don't know it would be so bad to appeal to certain people who possibly aren't coming from a position of strong moral authority, just as so much so as it is just all they've been taught. And you possibly could break through to some of these people. I'm sure there are plenty of people actually who went to, who grew up in a religious household and were taught these things and were out there in front of Planned Parenthoods protesting at, 14, 15, 16. And then as they grew and had new experiences, they came and met different people who opened up their eyes to certain things. I bet those views evolved.
I'm going to read some IMs if that's okay with everybody. Someone wrote in for Sam. He's not here today. Jimmy Dorable says, hey, I'm a game 2 tonight. How do you feel about my Bucks' chances of stealing the game before they head back to Milwaukee? I actually think the Bucks, I think it's going to go 6 games, maybe 7. I think the Suns will win. But, my boyfriend's brother's a huge Bucks fan, so I'm rooting for the Bucks, but I think they could steal one in Phoenix for sure. It just really does depend. I think Giannis came out looking pretty good, but I wonder, Matt, I don't know what your thoughts are. Their ball distribution seems just off sometimes when he's back. Like, I almost felt like they did a better job, and Holiday and Middleton played better when he wasn't there, but
Drew Holiday, sorry. That's a Freudian slip. He disappears when it's all 3 of those guys out there, and I think it's going to be Suns in 5. I think Ayton is exactly the type of guy you want if you're trying to beat Giannis, especially when he's a little bit injured. So I think Suns in 5.
Yeah,
I gotta say that I did have a moment where I was like, why is she putting me on the spot here? How am I going to answer this one? I know nothing.
All right, luckily for you, I was referring to Matt there. Matt Binder is the Ferguson of the gang. Are you afraid of the dark child actor will be in God's Not Dead 3, The Midnight Society? I don't know what Ferguson means.
Yeah, I'm lost there too, but
hopefully it was a compliment.
Ferguson is the friend from Clarissa Explains It All. Wow, you really
I honestly don't remember that. Wow. I remember Clarissa in that show. I don't know if I remember the friend.
I hate to say that you're a poser, but it seems the 90s kid in you is a little bit weak.
I didn't watch Clarissa Explains It All. I didn't realize I needed to be a fanatic to be able to make a single reference when seeing Melissa Joan Hart on screen. But I wasn't a big Clarissa Explains It All fan, or Sabrina the Teenage Witch fan.
Did you watch Animorphs?
No,
I read those books though.
I was a Goosebumps. I was into Goosebumps.
I was as
Animorphs.
well. I can't wait to watch the new R.L. Stine Fear Street trilogy that's out. I'm very excited for that.
I didn't realize Animorphs was a show too.
It was a show.
I would have ate that shit up.
I think there's like 5 seasons of it too. There's a lot of seasons of Animorphs.
Well, when I partake in some substances, I'll watch that. Flair Child says Mr. Carlson's Neighborhood. Mr. Odd.
Oh, I got to butt in for 1 second. I'm sorry. You're being corrected, Brandon, buddy. In the chat on YouTube, they're correcting you and saying Ferguson was actually Clarissa's brother.
Right. That's right.
You said friend. I
said friend. I could lie and say I meant they were friendly brothers, but they got me.
Tell me
you got called, buddy. Called out.
Cocked.
Hate to be embarrassed like this publicly.
Greg in Chicago said God's Not Dead 2 is easily the funniest one. Leland Palmer as an evil ACLU lawyer. Also, Kevin Sorbo dies in the first movie just in time to repent. Cower with Crowder said God's Not Dead 4, my victim complex.
I just want to reiterate my standing debate challenge. I don't issue these often, but to Kevin Sorbo. We are both graduates of Minnesota State University in Moorhead. I don't know who. I think we're probably the 2 most prominent political pundits these days. And I think name your time, place, and topic, Kevin Sorbo.
And with you saying that, I'll read this IM from Worrying Trajectory. Please don't become a YouTube debate me bro show.
Well, too late.
We've been that for quite a while, actually.
I actually had an issue when I saw people bring up. Let me let you talk first, Brandon, because you were going to say something. Because I actually wanted to go into a little something now that it's brought up. Go ahead.
I was going to say my promise to listeners is that I will never have the attention span to listen to anybody that I don't agree with for longer than 10 minutes or so without becoming incredibly dismissive and probably like writing up.
Right. So there was a little bit of a thing online the other day that I saw about, and it's all pegged to Sam and Crowder's thing, obviously, because that was the only debate anyone's been talking about for the past couple of weeks. So all this criticism of the whole debate me bro culture is pegged to that, which makes no sense to me because Sam is not really part of that world, nor has this show ever been. Do we do a lot of debates on this show? From even when I was on the show, yes, the libertarian debate callers were always part of it. But the debate me bro culture was always the whole like dramatization thing and the whole like, oh, let's just talk about if the Holocaust is real or not over, playing games on Twitch, and we'll debate that. Like that was the whole like dumb debate culture. I don't get why this show is brought up in that when all these debates have been substantive and also almost like regularly this show. And Matt, I remember you clipped a few people and posted it. A number of people have reached out to this show and even me over the years to say like, yeah, I fell on one of these debates Sam had, or like you, Matt, against like the men's rights activists from back in the day. And it totally like made me look at a new perspective and it began my move to the left.
Oh yeah. I love like the quote tweets for like the Mediaite article or Lizard Rumsfeld's tweet where it's people saying like, I'm so glad I'm not a libertarian anymore. And that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's so weird that this show gets brought up in that because we do debates. Like the debate me bro thing is totally different. Like Ben Shapiro offering to pay AOC $10,000 is not something like this show has done. So, I mean, the debate me bro culture doesn't really fit here. I don't know.
Also, the degree to which Sam actually, debates these guys, he mostly just offers them a platform to explain how they really feel about things, and then it gets clipped for the internet to say these people are monsters.
I mean, that's exactly what happened yesterday.
Yeah,
right?
the vast majority of people, too, are just callers. Like, yes, every now and then we do actually plan one, like yesterday with the Ayn Rand Institute guy, because he is someone, he's just not some regular, rando who's spewing his opinion online. He is someone of some sort of prominent position in an organization of some value in that world. So, it's weird that, people act like this show is all about that. It's really weird. Like they don't pay attention to the first hour of the show where you guys do these long form interviews diving into policy. It's just bizarre to me.
I don't even really think the debate culture so much, or rather the underlying like mentality that supports the new like wave of debate online, like YouTube, Twitch style stuff, is that unfamiliar to people who like read modern, mainstream publications or even like watch mainstream news. Because mostly like the idea of like having a climate change denier versus having climate scientists on a panel to like argue as though they have equally supported positions is just a facet of our political media sort of space. If you're not talking about even direct interactions between like one wrong person and one like, I guess, right person insofar that their ideas are being supported by evidence and not just like feeling, then that supports a lot of what our op-ed sections pretend to be about. Like, oh, we have this mix of like right and wrong people, and somehow being in conversation with each other enhances or like, enriches the people who are being asked to tell right from wrong based only on like two people being presented as having diametrically but equally supported positions by the nature of what a debate or those platforms look like. Because I think that's really the problem with, a debate. It doesn't really solve anything, but it does imply by nature of how it's formatted and structured that these two sides are even because you have one side talking with another side, and B, that it can be solved through rhetorical, like whatever we're talking about can be solved through rhetorical, the rhetorical structure of a debate, when in reality debates are just about talking fast, overwhelming your opponent with like a series of like loosely connected facts, and it doesn't really solve anything, right? All it really does is serve to legitimize positions that aren't necessarily supported by body of research.
Yeah, sure. But in my estimation, like just, if you're able, like obviously when you do a debate, each side's going to have their audience and, you know, the leftist supporters are going to support the leftists in debate and say they won the debate. And on the other hand, the right wing guys supporters are going to say he won the debate. Sure, of course that happens. But I mean, there's always, and just from my own experience, there's always even just a few people who are like, you know, this other guy makes sense. And that could be their beginning.
Yeah,
I mean, it always falls, by the way. I mean, I don't know many people who became, who were left wingers. And then I don't know any people who became left wingers, saw one of these debates and then was like, I'm actually think I'm going to be a right winger now. Like that. I've never heard that happen. So, I mean, it's pretty clear that a lot of these times, and based on how everything works too, that the algorithms on all these platforms that these debates happen on push people towards these right wingers like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro. And so they are not even aware of these other people on the other end of the political spectrum in the first place. Just to even get those people in that same world, that same space for those people to become aware of them is a huge win, I think.
No, I mean, I agree. I think, you know, when you're talking about infiltrating a space in order to like win support, you can do it and it works, right? I mean, how many people, like you said, are open to changing their mind in like the siloed world of the internet and the siloed world of right wing, you know, user space is debatable, but, you know, who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter. You know, I don't disagree with it can be fruitful. And also, like, you know, in terms of like Twitch and YouTube debates, how many people are really talking about being swayed one side or another is probably minuscule, generally speaking. I brought in the sort of larger context of that's how we sort of operate media-wise, because I think that's where the bread and butter of like the legitimization of some of these like right-wing ideas that are then being played out online in these debate spaces are, you know, they begin to take root in people's minds. And then they find themselves falling down this rabbit hole of YouTube just from like reading what is, you know, let's say a respectable right-winger in the New Yorker or the Atlantic or like the New York Times spouting things that are only one step removed from Ben Shapiro, who are then only one step removed from a like cadre of even further right people that lead people down this rabbit hole. But when it comes to actually like winning people over from the right, I'm actually very supportive of it. The only time I sort of disagree when it comes to that kind of thing is when people sort of insinuate that like people on the left also need to be like watching these debates to like learn the other side's like ideas. And that's just like, it's stupid to me. It's like, yeah, if you're like rolling this, like, you know, that's why I kind of like the debates on the majority report. It's like, you're just like rolling this libertarian. That's funny. And, you know, it's worthwhile just for being funny. But like, if you're going to argue that like listening to Tucker Carlson is worthwhile because he's had some good ideas, it's like, no, you know, you can go there to win the right, but don't tell me that I'm going to be enriched by seeing that. That's stupid.
Oh, right. You definitely should not be listening to these guys to try to understand them. I think it is helpful to listen to what they're saying so you can know how to take what they're saying apart, because people are listening with the intent to learn. And I think that's obviously a good reason to watch those shows, so you can see where their discourse is, so you can prep yours to combat that, to argue against it.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you argue against some of this stuff, though. We've got two clips I want to get to, one from the Good Liars and then just this image here. Not sure which one. We'll save 10 for after this. So the Good Liars, who we've had on the show before, they're hilarious. They've gone to many a Trump rally, I would say, and many a political event and pulled some pranks. This isn't a prank, though. This appears to be as real as anything. They spoke with a woman who's clearly a Q follower wearing a very specific shirt, and they made a bet. I think this is a free $100 if he ever comes to collect, but let's take a listen.
Trump Kennedy 2021. What does that shirt mean?
I think that JFK Jr. is still alive.
The guy who died in the plane crash in the late 90s? You think he's still alive?
I do.
And he's going to come back and be president with Trump this year?
I hope so.
But how would Trump become president this year? There would be a new election?
There's a lot of things I think have happened, and there's some things I think I know, and a lot of things I don't.
Okay. And one thing you do know is John F. Kennedy Jr. is still alive?
That's what I believe.
Okay. Do you want to bet? Do you want to bet on it? I'll bet $100 that JFK Jr. doesn't come back from the dead. To do it.
But I don't think he's dead.
Oh, okay. I'll bet $100 that he's not alive.
But
you bet 100?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it.
Great.
Okay.
Sweet.
All right.
They
She's
put up
sure
another.
of it.
They put up another clip where they actually met up with the guy who QAnon believes is JFK Jr., Vinny Fusca, and they tried to get him to say on the record that he's JFK Jr., but he wouldn't. He wouldn't bite. He ran away laughing.
Yes, well, I mean, obviously he has to protect himself, Matt. He can't reveal that
Right.
he's truly JFK Jr. I also just wonder, like, one, why is JFK Jr. central to this conspiracy theory? Like, it could be anybody. It also could be any dead Republican. JFK Jr., the Kennedys, were a notoriously Democratic family, pretty well known in Democratic circles. Not sure why JFK Jr. would jump on board with the Trump campaign at this point, unless he's, very, very concerned about all the pedophiles and the pizza parlors and such.
Honestly, I'm sure there's some really convoluted logic behind why is JFK Jr., but I would argue that it's probably just like the national treasure effect, where it's like that's a name that a lot of people are going to recognize, and so that's what takes purchase, and so like that's become part of the conspiracy.
It's like the future king.
You're supposed to sort of like these conspiracies are supposed to make you feel good about like knowing and learning things, and if you have to like read too much, like if it's about, I don't know, a lesser known Republican family, it's just not going to take people's heads.
Right. Well, the JFK Jr. thing is, well, basically they think nobody ever dies. Every celebrity, QAnon believes that every celebrity has basically been either cloned or is living undercover. Like they don't believe anyone ever dies. It's bizarre. But JFK Jr., the reason why they go with that is because because of what I just said. So he's alive. And then B, there's a number of pictures back in the 90s, probably even before that. But there's a number of pictures in the 90s of JFK Jr. and Donald Trump at the same functions, on like Getty and things like that, because they were both Democrats during that time period. They both ran in the same New York City socialite circles. And that's really the basis that makes them believe this. Why a Democrat? Well, it helps them to try to understand that this is a fight that transcends party lines. The idea that Trump is taking down this global pedophile ring of cannibals who are drinking babies' blood, and they're obviously from Hollywood and Jewish, and also very many Democrats and even some elite Republicans are part of this group of pedophiles in this ring. So they needed someone, and they had the pictures from back in the day. They have the belief that he's alive because no celebrity ever really dies. So there you go. That's pretty much. And by the way, Q, when he or she or they were still posting, the JFK Jr. conspiracy is one they outright came out and was like, no, but it doesn't even matter. It really doesn't even matter, because once QAnon grabs a hold of something, QAnon as the whole, then there'll always be pockets of QAnon that continues to promote that thing.
You hate to see sectarian conflict in a conspiracy theory group. It's like the flat earthers who believe in the dome versus those who don't believe in the dome. It's a lot of hatred. Soon they're going to turn on each other.
You don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. Just it's like a divorce, right? I mean, no matter what you feel about the couple together, you don't want to see a family break apart or a Q cult break apart.
Sometimes it's for the best at the end of the day. I just thought that Trump was like on a media tour. You're trying to raise money, trying to get, The Apprentice onto, I don't know, Crackle or something. Bring that back. But apparently he's, launching a new campaign with, I guess, the ghost of Nixon or something.
Yeah, I mean, why stop there? Like, I want Trump Elvis 2024, Trump King Tut 2024.
A lot of people.
Trump Michael Jackson 2024.
Why not MLK? Maybe he's alive too. Maybe Trump is going to run with MLK. I'm sorry, Dr. Reverend Martin King Jr. I can't have the ACL after me again after, that last thing.
Q definitely would want him to run as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, I think that would be a precondition for their support.
The interesting thing is that they don't have anything, any day or event or political happening to tie this in with anymore. Like for a long time, even kick the can down the road and push it to this date when the votes are actually certified, or this day when Pence presents it to Congress. They were able to continually push it down the road and explain, like, this is why it makes sense. And even the inauguration, they pushed it to because, Trump was still president until Biden was sworn in. But now, like, they can't even explain for the most part. So, most will who are more savvy in that world will say, Trump's always been the president. He's still the president. Biden is just for show. Trump is really controlling the military. That's what a lot of them believe. She obviously maybe doesn't know that stuff or doesn't believe in that stuff, but she doesn't even know how Trump would get back into office by August 13th, which is their new day. It's, it is what it is. They'll keep pushing it though. August will come and go, and it'll be September, October, November, December. Then the midterms will somehow come into play, and then it'll be 2024. And that's how QAnon keeps going.
I feel like that is a unique quality about QAnon, because if you track like conspiracy people like Alex Jones, or even just like people further into that world, like they are always like making these predictions. I remember listening to some conspiracy theory podcast back in like 2014 about Ebola and how it was going to be the end of the world. Like they're always making these predictions, but they tend to be open-ended. QAnon picks like very specific dates to be wrong about, like kind of like Mayan calendar style stuff. Like, oh yeah, no, like the world is going to 100% end on May 25th, 2021 or something, because that makes it sound like it's way more authoritative. But then it's like, but it just doesn't ever happen. But conspiracy groups are definitely very skilled at kicking that can down the road. And then when something even vaguely resembling it happens 10 and a half years later, it's like, you see?
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like they'll pull all, like Q hasn't posted again since last year. So everything we've seen for these past 7 months have been based on what's already out there. So whenever something happens, they'll run back and pour into all these old Q drops from over the years, and they'll pull different numbers out and go, oh, this must mean, he was trying to tell us that this was going to happen on this date. And now I see why this makes sense, because he actually referred to this. And it's like he used the same word, which ends up being like a generic dictionary term. It's like they just will continue to use those to keep it going, and that's why it'll never end. It'll transform into something else, I'm sure, at some point, but right now it is what it is. QAnon is here to stay.
I mean, what's the term? Apophenia, like the tendency for people to find connections and patterns and things that are inherently random. Like that's just an inherent part of the human condition, one of very few. And I think this kind of thing appeals to people. And like conspiracies are about how you feel. It's about the friends we make along the way, not about the arrest and prosecution of Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's perfect
exactly
transition. So hold on. In terms of conspiracy, we've got to get to this before the show wraps, and I have a feeling we might go a little long on this. So, Mike Lindell and Michael Flynn, who is central to the QAnon authority, because he was part of the Trump administration who goes to all these Q conventions and is clearly just signaling to them in every way except saying, I am Q or whatever. He and Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, who's lost his goddamn mind, they stood in front of this very questionable whiteboard. I want to take a look at this because this is like even worse than that Charlie Day meme from It's Always Sunny. Like, there's a lot of Jesus scripture on there. Can we zoom in? So at the center is Donald Trump, obviously, right?
Whoa, that's high level crazy.
Yeah, high level. And, of course, Mike Lindell this is all of the evidence that he presented. And I don't know how you honestly make a whiteboard that intricate if you don't accidentally like put your palm on it and erase it, but they must have gone center to out towards the corners. Zoom in a little just on the center, and then we can use their method. President Trump. Okay. Dinesh D'Souza.
I actually watched his movie recently, Hillary's America. That's the one where he like goes to jail, because that one, I watched the beginning of that one recently, so I'm with him so far.
Yeah. Project Veritas, Dinesh D'Souza is very central to this somehow. I mean, he's the journalist on the beat. Tiffany Trump, she'd be happy to see that she's included in her father's conspiracy. Glenn Beck also somehow a part of this. Governor Kristi Noem, that's good news for her and her 2024 aspirations. The Q people, or at least the guy who's investigating all of this, Lindell, he sees her as central. Just as central as Donald Trump Jr. Sorry, buddy.
This was
right.
this whiteboard was to I forgot which right-wing podcaster put this together, but it was ways they can get their theories to the president to let him know things. I think it was actually about COVID, ways to get COVID information to President Trump. And this was back.
Oh, and I'm sorry, is that entire left-hand side just like a prayer?
Yes.
That's not good. You know, I've seen what's the Carpenter movie, Mountains of Madness or Mouth of Madness.
Yes.
He's pretending to be schizophrenic in that insane asylum, and you don't want to see a bunch of religious stuff just sprinkled in there.
I do see after the religious stuff, though, in different font, after talking about heavenly places, far above, there we go, something, and power, and might, and dominion. Dun, dun, dun.
Right. Yeah.
Why would the Bible contain the word dominion?
I also
Dominion voting systems. Go on.
I also say Huey Freeman. So I'm wondering if that's a reference to the Boondocks or perhaps the Black Panthers, or
I'm sure the Black Panthers are involved in this.
What I do like is Tiffany Trump doesn't appear to be in like the direct to President Trump circle. Like, appears like she has to still go through somebody to.
So there's Ivanka down there. You see that? Ivanka, Sean Spicer and Charlie Kirk. Oh yeah, Lou Dobbs, right? Why is he all the way down there?
Kevin Sorbo's there, right above Sean Hannity. Oh, this is like one of those. This is like a highlights, but for
I know, but I also love how they included photos. I mean, how did they even paste them onto there? And what do the different stars next to people mean?
Is there a key? Is there a key somewhere? Can we look on the other side? Is there a key? Oh, wait, what's down there? It looks like there's a key there. At the very, what is it? Turn. I can't read it.
I can't see it either. Yeah. I'll try and find a more high quality photo, but I think this might be the best.
Yeah,
I think it is the best one. Yeah.
Attorney General bars kind of fall out there.
I do see Dan Bongino down there now, though. Dan Bongino, Sean Hannity. Yeah, some of these guys, you know what it looks like? It looks like they weren't planning on making this quite so intricate, because some of those names definitely have direct connection to Trump. And they're further away from Trump, and you can tell they like wrote those names down, and then as they were writing names down, they were like, "Oh wait, what about this person?" And this person.
Ron DeSantis is closer to the president than Melania Trump.
Right.
well, that might actually be true, honestly. But yeah, I mean, that all of these things, this is what they just want you to believe, right? They want you to believe Melania is close to Trump, although no one really wants that, but. All right, well.
I love this C clamp that's holding it all together here at the top.
What function is that serving if it's a whiteboard? Or is this like an already pre-existing sheet of paper that they pasted onto this?
There might be something holding it up in the back, like a piece of wood that's attached to, like, because they don't have an actual easel there or something. That it looks like it's on a normal easel, so I don't know what it could be. It could just be like, they're just holding it there for.
I just like the idea of someone coming up to inspect it, and Mike Lindell, sweaty, runs in from the side. Don't touch it.
No, I want to go there.
Don't smudge it.
I want to go there with a notebook and try to copy every single thing and see if anybody notices me what I'm doing.
I want to run my finger from the top like you used to do in school with a whiteboard, right? Where you just kind of put it maybe subtly through what the teacher wrote. I mean,
I just want to erase a few names and like replace them with like even weirder names like Teletubbies, and just like see if anyone notices. Just like replace Dan Bongino and just be like Scooby Doo, or like replace Sean Spicer and just go like I don't know, Jackie Chan, and see if anyone is able to like accurately assess that this has been changed, or if if for the effect, the sort of Glenn Beck style effect of having a chalkboard, like, oh, I'm instructing. Like there's some sort of method going on here. So it's the illusion of structure. It's a very, very barely maintained illusion.
It would be funny if they actually used that board. Like, it's not just like something that they just wrote out there for like entertainment purposes when they were on the stream or whatever. Like, that's actually the board they use to figure out like and you erase a name and they're like, okay, we tell Dan Bongino and he'll get it to Scooby-Doo. No, who was Dan Bongino supposed to get it to? No.
Then they're like the Goodwill Hunting of conspiracy theories if they can use that board, because that is some high level like conspiracy theorem.
I love a good Will Hunting reference. You want to take one more call and then we'll get out of here?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Let's take a call from 832. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 832.
Hey, is it me?
It is you. What's up, 832?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, how's it going? This is Samir from Houston. So I heard you guys talking a while back about state ownership of companies, and I wanted to point out that the best investment, I'm a millennial investor, that I've made all year was an Airbus, which is a state-owned company in Europe, obviously, and I made 14% off of it.
Interesting. I don't know what to do with that information, to be quite frank. I'm not good with investments and things like that.
That should not be
Right.
misconstrued
Well, the
as
idea that I
investment
had
advice
is, like-
from the caller.
Right. This is
No,
not
no,
financial
it's not-
advice,
it's not
right?
investment advice.
Yeah, the show does not offer financial
Right,
advice to its
but
viewers.
the point is, the point is that, like, you know, you can actually have some form of socialism, some kind of socialism light anyway, while propping up the stock market. And, you know, there's that old idea that you can make employees invested in a company in exchange for improved productivity.
Right.
So, like, giving them that is a form of payment that then drives up the stock price in addition to increasing productivity.
Right. Yeah. It's something. Yeah. You didn't throw down any money in AMC? No GameStop?
No, I didn't do any of the meme stocks, but I mean, I wasn't on top of it, you know.
Right. Thanks for the call.
I'm trying to be like a progressive investor. So, yeah,
Well,
for sure.
I don't know what to do with. I don't as someone who I don't really touch the stock market, but as someone who is a big cryptocurrency critic and people who invest in that stuff, I have feelings where you probably can't. It's probably those feelings can probably transfer over to the stock market too. I don't know enough about it, to be quite honest. Thanks for the call though.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I actually not necessarily, I agree with the sort of the line of thinking that the caller is going down, because more so than like judging public companies specifically by like the standards of private companies, a la performing on the stock market, you know, being able to like provide a certain level of return on investment, I think it's just more important, and like this can be part of that same project in dispelling the narrative that the public sector can't do anything better than the private sector. Because I think that's what is the undercurrent the call is getting at, that we have this underlying idea in America that the private sector is better at everything, as represented by these metrics that the private sector gets to set, and that the public sector, is better off small enough to drown in the bathtub, basically out of the way. Who needs the postal service? Let's just have UPS deliver the mail too. And so, dispelling that narrative that not only can the private, sector not keep up with the public sector in certain metrics in certain industries, but also that the public sector should be the only sector in certain industries, is just a long-term goal that, I think can be enhanced by pointing out that in Europe and other places, the public, people, instead of investing in private companies, understand the value of public companies, just broadly speaking, because it's uniquely American to sort of view the public sector with such ire. And that goes back into the conversation about teachers and why the right is always going after teachers, and why people are susceptible to the idea that teachers in public schools are, these living too high on the hog and aren't doing their jobs and are lazy, but are also engaged in this long-term project of indoctrination.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I look at it as, if you invest in the stock market, obviously, it is what it is. You need to do what you got to do to, and some people do that for work or for retirement investment, and it exists. And you gotta take part. It's like the Matt Borges comic, you wish for a better society, but you gotta take part in the one that we've got, right? But always in my head, it's the same thing with crypto. It's like, in order for you to gain in the stock market and in cryptocurrency, those gains come from people who lose, and often those losers are just regular people. It's not like you're knocking down like the big investment bank firms and the the hedge funds. So I don't know if you could, but if you are going to invest, I guess a company like that would be the one to do it with. You know, don't invest in companies that do bad for the world, like companies that are bad for the environment and things like that. Again, all of this, none of this financial advice. That's why I'm not mentioning any specific companies.
I don't know anything about investing, Matt. I just sort of, when you were giving some dubious statements, I just sort of, you know, tuned out as to not implicate myself.
Right. I don't know anything about stock market. That's where
potential SEC investigators.
That's why where I tap out.
Let's just do some more IMs and then we'll jump because I got interviews if that's cool with you guys.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah, Mark Monkey says Sam is a good debater and not a debate bro because unlike a lot of the debate bros on Twitch and otherwise, Sam actually gives a shit about what he's arguing about. The same can be said of Michael, RIP, and also Binder's old debate with Paul Elam, which was hilarious.
Elam. Oh yeah, that one's a fun one.
Avelino Gracias says God is not dead. They're a libertarian because people die and he does nothing. Adam from LA says, what's the Elvis is still alive percentage amongst the Q crowd? Also, when do these people think that missing celebrities actually die? At some point, Tupac is going to be 80 in their minds.
Right. My favorite one is that I don't know what it transformed into now, being that they're both dead. But Jim Morrison of The Doors is actually Rush Limbaugh. That was my favorite.
Clearly, neither of you have seen the movie The Island, starring, I think, Aaron Eckhart, or maybe it was like Ewan McGregor, doesn't really necessarily matter, and Scarlett Johansson. Clearly, they're cloning replacement bodies for celebrities and implanting their brains in them.
Clearly. Me and Pillow Guy says, or Mind Pillow Guy, jeez. Really looking forward to voting for Donald Trump and Fred Hampton ticket in 2023. Chairman Meow says Binder, Airbus is not good for the environment. So
there you go. There you go. That's why I said I know nothing about the stock markets. I don't know anything about these companies and what they do and their financial stuff. So throw the stock market up there with cryptocurrency when it comes to my opinion being these things are bad.
Morbid Leaf says, speaking of debate bros, Vaush will be debating Charlie Kirk and Dim Tool on critical race theory. Okay, looking forward to that. Chumologist says Q believes never die because then they would have to throw away and eat the cost of all those t-shirts. That's very true. Flarechild said, did Eric not make the whiteboard sad? I didn't see that he made the whiteboard, so who knows. Just a few more and then we'll run. Nerd Cheetah says, how would pro-life people punish rich folks who sneak off to a spa somewhere to get their pretty sons and daughters out of a fix? They probably wouldn't punish them at all. Papa the Band said, my ex had an abortion and it was the most emotional traumatic experience she went through. She didn't regret making the choice that was right for her, but it was incredibly difficult. I can't imagine, I think that would probably be some of what I went through just as someone who wants to have kids. I don't know, I would probably say this isn't the right time in my life, but eventually I want to have kids. So I don't know. It's tough. It's very individual. It's almost like women are individual people.
What?
I know. All right, just a few more. Ray Wise played Laura Palmer's father, possessed as he was by Bob. He was her killer, says Christo. I don't know which movie that was in reference to.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks.
He played the devil in that, I think WB show or CW show, The Reaper. Oh my God, starring the guy from Chuck or something.
You are just a well of the worst TV ever made.
I know. How?
And a very smart political analyst as well. It's crazy.
It's actually not the guy I was thinking of. It's the boyfriend from Grounded for Life, who is the main character in Reaper.
Just proving my point.
Yeah, right.
Watched any of these
Grounded
shows.
for Life. Damn it! What was that show?
And then his friend is the guy from Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
I mean, the boyfriend in Grounded for Life.
Let me see if I'm right. Jesus, I gotta look this up now.
Okay, all right.
Emma, didn't you have somewhere to be? Emma, all of a sudden, Grounded for Life comes up, and it's like, hold the phone. Everybody's got to wait.
We got 1 minute because I'm doing the final IM of the day.
Yep, got it. Brett Harrison, got it. Yeah.
All right, perfect. And the final IM of the day, the Tim Caucus. This feels really last minute. Any of you know where I can get tickets for the August 13th inauguration? Hilarious. Thank you so much, guys. Wonderful Thursday. Have a great rest of your day. Check out Doom. Check out the Discourse. Check out Left Reckoning, as always. And the Noma Key Show, which I don't know if it's on today, but it's on usually many days. All right. Have a good one, guys.
Peace. Take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. Finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made.